All right, so first of all, a short introduction from our side about the Europe Jams. They are part of a European Public Sphere project. And usually we tour around Europe to gather people under a wooden dome to talk about different topics and have a discussion. But due to the current situation, we can't do that. So we decided to try this project online. And we want to collect all of your ideas and thoughts on the future of Europe in form of an online exhibition and present those ideas directly to the European Commission. And also I'd like to add that this project is funded by the Alfred Töpfer Foundation. Our topic today is gender in Europe. And I think we've seen a lot of changes when it comes to gender equality in the last years, and positive and also negative ways. But I feel like the society is finally trying to break with the static concept of gender and gender equality that is deeply rooted within our society. So, but I guess until we get to a point of gender equality in Europe, it's still a long way to go. So that's why I'm very excited for all of you to join today and join the discussion. And I'm very excited for all of your ideas. And now I'm giving the word over to my colleague, Josie.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, hello and welcome from my side. I just wanted to add that we will record the session, as Anna said, and that it will also be published on our YouTube account, so you can rewatch it or send it over to your friends and colleagues after. Yeah. And to make sure that everyone can speak and discuss their ideas, under the participants button, you can find the virtual raise your hand feature. So if you have a question, just click on it and raise your hand virtually. But please wait till the last person to speak has finished. Yeah, and now to get started, I think it would be good if each of the 11 speakers would shortly introduce themselves and tell their work. As we are lucky to have more stakeholders of all over the field of gender in Europe than usual, we included 2 introductory questions, which each of the speaker will also answer to in their introduction. The first question is, what do you think are the main issues regarding gender in Europe? Followed by a second question, what is your suggested approach to solve this issue? And after each introduction, you can ask questions which are urgent and refer directly to the speaker's content, but generally we would like to have a bigger discussion afterwards. Yeah, and after the introduction round, the discussion will be very open and free. You can hand over the floor to the next person who wants to comment or add something. Yeah, and I think that's all from my side right now, and we get started. Maybe someone wants to start. Yeah, Basak, you want to start? I think you have some slides for us, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I have some slides which I can share. So I'll just try. Wait. First, I have to get this small actually down there. Okay, now I can share. Sorry. And I'll share this one, and then I'll start my presentation. Okay, so let's just start now. Okay, you see it, I think. So I'm Basak Ibsen, and the perspective that I want to give is one from the sciences. So I'm actually not an expert on gender equality, but I'm a marine scientist, and we had a very special project, which was funded by the European Commission, which just ended. It was 4 years, and it was about improving gender equality in marine sciences. Mm-hmm. So the first question is, where do the gender inequalities lie? And I want to show you a scene from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields in Europe. So what you see here is a graph that shows the percentage of women in red and the percentage of women in gray over the last 10 years or so in Europe. So this is data collected from all 28 EU countries, and it shows the career path from a student that graduated in one of these STEM fields to a PhD into the first position in science, and then all the way to professorship. And these were data that was collected as part of the She Figures, which is an initiative of the European Union. And what you see here is the typical graph we get, that you already have about 40% of women at the entrance after university. And as you go through the career line, this is called a scissor diagram. So the scissors keep opening up, and at the very highest level, you end up with very few women. And this is what our project was aiming to, let's say, address. And another example, this is data we collected as part of our project. So what you see here is, again, women and men in different colors. In the typical colors, we might think about changing those. But what you see here is the number of men and women, or the percentage who led a scientific research cruise. So these were people who were leading cruises going out from Germany all over the world's oceans. And this was 2-year averages. And I think there are about 300 cruises or so. And what you see here is, again, that few women led these cruises compared to men. And this is what we refer to as glass ceiling. So these are kind of, this glass ceiling is referring to invisible barriers that stop women from reaching the higher levels in their career. So I kind of wanted to show you this figure, which we got from the Canadian Equality, from the government of Canada, and it was, I think, put together by UN. So what we want to do, this is the answer to the second question, is to remove systematic barriers. So if you give everyone the same treatment, what you see on the first figure, they may not watch the game, right? And so you try to, maybe in an equitable treatment, try to give a kind of a measure for each so they can watch the game. But what we ideally want is that we remove this barrier. And then the barrier is gone, everyone can really enjoy watching the game. And how we in our project and others define gender equality, it always changes, but we refer to the equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of all genders, male, female, and diverse. And this is relevant and should engage everyone. And just as a last thing, I want to tell you about the fact that we all have subtle gender biases, and this affects not only sciences, but everyday decisions in all around the world, in all jobs and in our daily daily life. So this was a riddle that was told to us by an expert in one of our first meetings as the project, and I want to pass it on to you because I think it's really nice. So the riddle goes: a father and son are in a horrible car crash that kills the dad. The son is rushed to the hospital. Just as he's about to go under the knife, the surgeon says, "I can't operate, that is my son." So can you explain this? Who is the surgeon? I'll leave you with this. I won't answer it because most people can't find the answer right away. And this kind of really directs to gender biases we have in our heads. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Also for the riddle. I will think about that. Yeah. Does someone else wants to continue? Oh, a lot of people. Okay, yeah. Then let's go.
Should I? I mean, I can go next. I actually love the riddle. It's his mom, right? Yeah. It was amazing. It was an amazing riddle. I love it. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you today. I mean, tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and hear all of you and speak to everyone. My name is Nikolina Blažanović. I'm from Croatia, and I'm a member of Young Feminist Europe. So Young Feminist Europe is an open platform that aims to amplify young feminist voices and activities across Europe and even further. We want to see a Europe where young feminists from different backgrounds and experiences impact and shape a society that is built on intersectional values and we want to move on from traditional power structures to a more inclusive and participatory space. We have had two bigger campaigns, Her Europe and My Clit Counts, and we have just been selected as leaders for the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. What we see as a problem in Europe today, and not just in Europe, in the world, are the constant attacks on women's bodily autonomy and women's right to choose. And we can also see the pushbacks against the LGBTQI+ community and gender non-conforming people. We try to work on these topics, harnessing the power of grassroots and digital activism to create movements cross borders. So to us, cooperation is key on these issues, and strong cross-border movements are successful, as we can even currently see in Poland. I also want to highlight that we are a youth-led organization, and that youth-led organizations are really, really important because we give a new perspective to issues in our society. We often focus on young people, and we often see youth as a problem, not as a key to development and individuals capable of putting forth important contributions. Policies and programs must reflect the reality that we are living in and addresses our needs and challenges. It's very difficult for us to sometimes access existing structures, often because they're very hierarchical and there's gatekeeping. If we are involved in something, it's often in a tokenized way, not in decision-making and shaping agendas. At Young Feminist Europe, we believe that young feminists, young people in whole, are not just leaders of tomorrow, but we are leaders of today. So that's why we push for more meaningful and impactful engagement and you taking co-ownership of shaping agendas and policies. That's why I'm so happy to see all of you young people here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolina. Thank you so much. Let's continue with Nyke. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I also love the riddle we heard at the beginning. I think it's a very popular one, and it always makes me think about how important language actually is in shaping our thinking. Yes, my name is Nyke Slawik from Germany, and I'm a transgender and a queer rights activist, and also an active member of the German Green Party. I wanted to talk a little bit about bodily autonomy because I think it's an issue where especially women's rights and queer people's rights overlap a lot. So I think Europe really should focus on women, queer and gender diverse people being able to decide what's happening with their bodies, and they should be protected from violence against their bodies. Women, queer people and also transgender people experience more discrimination, more physical or sexual abuse, and more often develop mental illnesses than cisgender men. How the right to make decisions about your own body, bodily autonomy, is violated in Europe. Abortion is still illegal or semi-illegal in many European countries. In most European countries, transgender people need to be diagnosed as mentally ill in order to have their gender legally recognized. In many countries, trans people have to undergo sterilization in order to do so. And this was actually called a human rights violation. Also, another human rights violation against the bodily autonomy of queer people is the violation of intersex children. In many European countries, genital mutilation on intersex children and newborn babies is still a very widespread practice because our society wants to have bodies just as male or female. Everything that is not clearly shaped as either or is seen as wrong, as not right, and it's very hurtful to gender diverse people. Yeah, and this is very traumatizing for intersex people and a clear human rights violation. Why is that? I think it is because historically the male body and cisgender male identity has been the norm for lawmakers in Europe and in our history. Why do I speak about women, queer and transgender people at the same time? Because when we look around Europe, conservative and far-right politicians are attacking women's rights and queer people at the same time. They speak about biological sex, about traditional gender roles, and about that they need to protect children and family values. Look at what is happening in Poland. The government has de facto banned abortion completely, and a third of the country has declared themselves as LGBTI-free zones. And similar things are happening in other European countries too. A massive attack on women and on queer people, on the LGBTIQ community. So what do we need? We need strong solidarity among women and queer people, and we need intersectional positions and perspectives. And we need more protection from violence. But in conclusion, it's really important for me not only to portray us as victims. I think it's very, very important that we as women and as queer people are seen as actors, that we reclaim our power in Europe. And so I think all of this can only change if we have more women and more queer people in decision-making positions. And unfortunately, here we still are a minority. So it's very important that we have a change. And if it doesn't happen by itself, we need quota systems for women and for gender diverse people in the European institutions and in the European member states. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nyke. Manon, I think you raised your hand too before, right?
Yes, I think so. I cannot see everyone. But yeah, hi everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me and for the great panel there. It's really nice to be here. So my name is Manon. I work at the European Women's Lobby. So I work at the Secretariat. We're based in Brussels, but we have members all over Europe, even outside of the EU. And we basically work for women's rights. So our members really work at the national level, even at the groundwork really level with grassroots organizations. And we at the Secretariat kind of do this liaison between the national level and the institutions in the EU bubble, as it's called. And so to answer kind of your questions, I think two really of the main issues right now regarding really gender equality is, well, first, violence against women and girls. I think, you know, as long as women are not free from this violence, there can't be real equality. You know, and I'm talking about really violence in all spheres, including domestic violence. And we've seen, unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, that it's gotten even worse when it was already a major issue. And I think the other point, and Nyke, you already talked about that, but it's really the lack of representation and participation of women in decision-making spaces. You know, mostly politics, but really all spaces of decision. Again, we've seen with the pandemic, for example, in terms of where the decision was taken on healthcare level, really few women were there, but at the contrary, they were at really the forefront of the crisis, and they represented kind of like around 83% of the frontline workers. So we have kind of this like overrepresentation of women in care, which is usually not recognized, unpaid, or very not well paid at all. And then women that are not present when the decisions are taken, and decisions that they are then going to have an impact on them, and usually a negative impact. because we don't have this perspective that is there. And so I think, you know, to keep to the 3 minutes, but there are many things we could do, but I think it's both taking specific actions. So, you know, having specific services for women when they are victims and survivors of violence, you know, making sure there's prevention happening, programs around this, making sure there's parity laws, as was said already with quotas, that there's work happening with the political parties. So really kind of this specific work done at different levels, but also making sure that gender mainstreaming happens. So basically that all policies that are taken either at the European level or national level have this perspective of women, both, you know, having them represented, but just making sure that this perspective is there and is implemented. And so realizing that the impact is going to be different on different groups of people. And of course, talking about women in all the diversity, because women are not a homogeneous group. So decisions are going to have a different impact also on women themselves. And making sure also that gender budgeting happens. So making sure the money is there, that the funding is there, and also making sure that there's a support for the women's rights organizations and the feminist organizations, because we know many of them, you know, we're here, we're advocating for our rights, we're denouncing what's happening, and we're also kind of delivering essential services that the state should be doing and is not doing. So I think really this support there is needed. But yeah, I'll stop there. That some of the things we could do to make it better.
Thank you. I think we can continue in the discussion afterwards about that. Yeah, totally. Astrid, you said that you have some slides. Do you want to continue maybe?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. I start with sharing my screen, I hope. That. Okay, can you see my presentation now?
We see your screen, but
oh, not my presentation. Okay.
Not the presentation yet.
Yeah, okay.
No worries, it will show.
Let's see here. I go like that. No. Oh. Like this. Do you see my screen now with my presentation?
No presentation for now.
Okay. Stop sharing.
If you want, you can just talk about it. That's totally fine.
Okay. Yeah, I had some illustrations for.
Oh.
I do think but I will work on this, and then somebody else can talk, and then come back to me.
Awesome. Christian, what about you?
Happy. Yes, everything should be working. Happy to do so. Can I share some slides as well?
Sure.
All right, let's see if these work. Do you see my slides?
Yes, we do.
Sweet. All right. Thank you so much for being here, and amazing to hear about all the other egalitarian or progressive initiatives going on around the world, or at least around Europe so far. My name is Christian, and I work with gender equality from a very multifaceted approach. I'll try to get around most of my angles in my 4 or 5 minutes. First of all, I've published this alongside with some of my colleagues. It is basically a very large booklet depicting the angry internet. So what I do for a living is to work with angry men on the angry parts of the internet. So I work with anti-progressiveness, anti-feminism, anti-equalitarian movements online, which basically means I'm paid to browse 4chan or just be on Twitter the whole day. So what I try to do is to understand why so many men are opposed to progressive politics or initiatives, or even just feminism or females in the first place. So what we did over the past 12 to 14 months was to analyze more than 65 million posts from Reddit, Twitter, and 4chan, find out how many of those were actually misogynist, and then find out how many of those misogynist posts, 100,000, were from the Nordic countries. And we found 850 very active writers. We didn't find a systemic anti-feministic movement, but we did find let's call it pockets of anti-feminists who would argue in between themselves how to take down this feminine or feminists shadow government that they were sure were part of why they weren't happy. And that was like our main point. So like my perspective on anti-feminism and anti-feministic movements are that when working online and working with male groups online, we find a disproportionately large amount of men saying that they do not feel well. They are unhappy, they feel vulnerable, they are not where they want to be. And when I say disproportionate is because when we interview kids in high school classes or universities or just on the streets, men will say, I'm good, I'm fine, everything is a-okay. Because men have a hard time grasping, coping with vulnerabilities, so on and so forth. Men are just always fine. But what we found online was that these men, all these men that we found on incel forums, on alt-right forums, on anti-feminism forums, and just on Twitter, all had very clear ideas. If they just had this one thing in their life, they would be happy. And all the things that they always were missing were obviously sex. Women had chosen not to give them sex. Therefore, women are evil. Or friends. They were misunderstood by their peers. Therefore, peers are evil. Society didn't recognize their achievements. Therefore, society was evil. And this whole idea, this whole, let's call it idea that there is a cabal or a culture of feminism or a state governing power that are keeping these men from being happy is part of what I research. So to answer the questions that was sent forth, one of the main issues I see with gender equality in Europe is this anti-progressive movement that is on the rise, not only in Poland, also in Denmark. We had a survey last year, I think 60,000 respondents, and 40% of them said that the fight for equality had gone too far. Like, we have too much equality, we need to tone down the level of equality in Denmark. And like, but we also see an underlying problem of the new male identity considering itself as a counterculture. We meet a lot of especially young men that consider feminism and female oppression as the default setting. So they don't see the narrative of the white average male as the baseline of society anymore. They see the angry feminist as the matriarch of society, and they feel a calling to fight her because she is the reason that they aren't getting sex or friends or recognition and so on and so forth. And they do that from different perspectives. We find them doing that from attacking them online or sending them dick pics because obviously feminists are lesbians and they need to see a penis, and all these ideas, all these let's call them wild conspiracy theories that these vulnerable men will tell each other as an explanation as to why they are unhappy. So one of the main issues I also find in the fight for feminism or equalitarian societies is working with the male identity, working with male emotional empowerment. One approach that we like to do with this is enforcing relevant adults around young men. We see a lot of these young men starting to talk about these, I keep calling them conspiracy theories, but it's also psychological explanations to own sadness. Once they, in the early teenage years, start voicing these, I am unhappy because women are evil. I am unhappy because women actively choose not to sleep with me. That is a problem on the women's side, not on my side. They feel that all the adults around them disregard their question or make little of it and just like, you're silly, because truth be told, maybe they are, but their emotions are very real. So like enforcing a recognition of those things, that is one part of what I do. The other part is that I just started Danish Male Society, Dansk Mandesamfund, which is the first male equalitarian organization in Denmark. It's made up of 7, let's call us radical feminists that fight for feminism and equality in Denmark. And the one question we get asked all the fucking time is, well, is it like an organization for gay people? And we always have to answer like, yes, also, but basically we work with feminism and equalitarian politics. And we have to explain every time we go out on the press that men, cisgendered, straight white, male, boring, average. Men can also be feminists. Like, it's not a slur. So just from that perspective, we have a really fucking long way to go. So I'm both a researcher and a quasi-political activist, angry white man kind of type of dude. But I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your perspective. I think that's very interesting too. Okay.
Shall I
Astrid?
make it? Shall I make a new try?
Yeah, go ahead, make a new try.
Let's see here. So I put this in the presentation mode, I hope.
Yes, we see your screen and we see a presentation.
Okay, and hopefully you see that presentation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm addressing this from a vehicle. It's about how men and women are represented when we assess vehicle safety, and that is then as occupants. And just some words about myself. I'm an engineer. I'm a researcher. I'm from Chalmers University in Sweden, and I'm also research director for the Swedish Road and Transport Research Institute, VTI. And I have been working with crash test dummies and models of the humans for more than 20 years. And I have started in the area of whiplash injuries, and traffic safety broadly is what I'm addressing. So I have a vision that by 2030, in-Euro protection performances of new cars will be assessed for both women and men. And by this vision, you then directly understand that that is not the case. So how is then new cars assessed? And this is why I wanted to have the slides, because it also gives you visually what is available and how we do this. These are the approval test regulations for vehicles used in Europe. It's used broader than that, but this is what all European Union countries apply these tests. And we have a seatbelt test, we have 2 frontal tests, and we have 2 side impact tests. And in all these tests, the norm is the average male, and the average female model is not used. And she is not used or even mentioned in the regulation because she doesn't exist. We in this area, we haven't even bothered yet to make a model that represents the female part of the population. So we have the average male as a norm, and then we have a very small female and a very large male to represent the range in the population, but the female part of the population is nowhere to be found yet. In recent research, I have addressed this together with colleagues, of course, a big team, and we developed the first computer model of a dummy for re-impact and addressing whiplash injuries, because that's where we have the biggest difference between the protection performances between women and men. And this was also one of the reasons for doing this, was also to show that the data is available, that we can make models of the average female and female part of the population, as we have already of the male. That was some 10 years ago we did this research, and now we are continuing in a project called Virtual, where we make computer models, which is called human body models, of both an average male and an average female. And this is the first time in our history that this approach has been used. In summary, when it comes to the slides, we we have the regulation that require us to use an average male. We also then have the law, the treaty of the function of the European Union, where it says that men and women should be addressed equally in several of the articles. And then we have what we actually do, where we use the average male as the norm. And so that then, when it comes to vehicle safety, that addresses the first question: what is the main issue? Yeah, the main issue here is that the female part of the population isn't even represented, and then of course not recognized either in the assessment of safety. And the solution here would of course be to do exactly that. So that was me in short. Thank you for having the opportunity to present here.
Thank you very much. This is so interesting. I've never heard about it, and it's really important. Thank you for that. Okay, so maybe Sophie, you continue, and after that, Dyria and her 3 colleagues from ReOrient are joining us. You can continue then too, because we also want to get into the discussion afterwards.
Well, thank you for having this event. Thank you for inviting us. I'm representing UACT. My name is Sophie. And UACT is the only feminist pan-European youth network on comprehensive, on sexual and reproductive rights, entirely led by young volunteers. And one of the main topics that we work on and we focus on is comprehensive sexuality education. And this is something that I wanted to highlight during this event as well, because comprehensive sexuality education is the baseline of understanding gender, understanding human rights, equality issues, positive approaches to identity politics, and to the systemic inequalities that exist in Europe, but not only in Europe, of course. One of the things that needs to be said is that young Europeans are not a homogenized group, and different young people based on their identities face different challenges. We also need to be very aware of the spaces that we speak in. Right now, for example, we don't have a lot of representatives from the communities of people of color, for example. So those agendas are, of course, left out because of that. People with disabilities also face different challenges when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to accessing healthcare services, accessing education. Of course, there are HIV positive people. There are many, many different groups of people that are not, unfortunately, not represented, including in decision-making spaces. So that's an issue. Comprehensive sexuality education, as I said, at home as well as at schools, creates a baseline of us understanding what gender is. And I would say one of the biggest challenges is that we don't fully grasp what gender is, what it means. We still think of it in a very binary setting as a box, and everyone who surpasses that box is penalized by the society in different forms. This needs to be solved, but this is rooted deeply in historical inequalities, and this also needs to be acknowledged. Another issue is something that the global pandemic has brought to our attention, which is gender-based violence. And I would say our societies are baffled to see how unequipped we were to face those realities that women, non-binary people, sex workers have faced in these times. A lot of inequalities, a lot of discrimination have come out of that. And also due to the fact that we can't see each other in person because of the lockdowns, the numbers of online dating has gone up, and the use of online dating apps have also gone up. And this has increased digital image-based abuse. And I would say that the lawmakers, human rights in general, has a huge gap between the need and the actual addressing of that issue. We don't have adequate laws to address that, which is a huge issue. And I would say, I would highlight that. I mean, gender budgeting, of course, is very important, but it has been said, as well as media representation of gendered narratives that are created, the opposition. All of this have been said, but we also need to think about the digital lives, what happens online, not only offline. For now, excuse me, for now, I think I would stop it here and we can go to the discussion with other topics.
Thank you so much. Dyria, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to start. We come from an initiative called ReOrient initiative. And basically, we are a group of women who came together and who work on telling stories from a different perspective, out of the perspective of POCs and from women coming from the Orient. So women from the Orient are breaking free from cultural boundaries, and as a vital part we play in our families, we are also crucial in public life, in enriching politics, economics, and civil society. Unfortunately, women from the Orient are not very visible, and if they're visible, they're always painted in a certain picture. So if we think of like the typical stereotype would be a woman wearing a hijab, but that does not necessarily represent all the women from that region. And what leaves that out is that there are a lot of minorities, ethnicities, and also Christians, which live in the region, but are never represented in the stories told about the region. So especially women are underrepresented in public life and positions of power across all sectors in the Orient, and this is mainly due to cultural barriers and backward religious interpretations on how life should be or used to be. And we speak here from a perspective of a minority which lives in Europe, but yet are still underrepresented. So we address the need for reorientation, and especially when it comes to the role women play from that region. What is the idea behind the initiative? The idea is to provide more angles and narratives on women in public positions who serve as examples and role models. And there's a lot happening actually on that front from the region, but we seldomly or rarely hear from them. So we want to give them a platform through our social media channels and also through us talking about it. We want to make those women more visible, and we want to bring out their stories. We want to tell their stories. We want to see them more visibly, also engaging in politics, also with the EU, because we have a lot of minorities living in the EU, but certainly underrepresented in politics, in economics, in education, and also science, as we have seen from the presentation from Basak also. So it's not only women, but especially women of color, basically. And this is where we tap into. And I'm very happy to be joined by my co-founders, Nasreen, and also Linder and Karina, and I would pass over to them now and let them have a say. Linda or Nasreen or Karina?
Okay, I can start. Shall I?
Yes.
Thank you very much for giving the word. My name is Karina Matvienko, and I'm originally Russian, a Russian master's student living in Berlin. I do my master's studies in Eastern European Studies, and extracurricular, I'm also a part of this wonderful initiative called ReOrient. My focus in this organization is on the Muslim women in Russia. One is very, very surprised usually very surprised when I say that Islam is a very big part of Russian culture, has always been. However, women in the country experience a lot of problems similar to the ones women experience in the Middle East and in the rest of the Orient. And so when talking about the North Caucasus region, one has to understand that no one is talking there about access to the power structures, about equal pay. One is talking about the lack of acknowledgement of human rights for women. So most of the problems women are facing are very different from what the rest of the women in Russia face, and they're usually narrowed down to genital mutilation, denial of access to education, honor killings, polygamous marriages, early marriages, and even denial of freedom of movement. This is all is happening against the backdrop of re-Islamization of the society, especially of the four main regions, the main Muslim regions, Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, and Kabardino-Balkaria. And the rise of, also against the backdrop of the rise of fundamentalism and creation of neo-traditional customs and traditions. And speaking about the new traditions, someone has said that the youth is usually to blame, and in this case, the youth is really to blame here, because all of the customs and traditions created, for example, polygamous marriages, are mostly promoted by the youngsters rather than by the elderly. And a lot of studies shows that, for example, polygamous marriages are a completely new trend in the region. And these are mostly men between 20 and 50 years old who have more than one wife. And hence a lot of women also in this age range feel less independent, and they feel less safe when it comes to their children and their own lives. So when it comes to solution, also the problem of this region is also, I guess this is the main problem, that women are muted not only by the society but also by the government. So of course everything comes from the culture. Also, what is very important to notice is that the North Caucasus is a highly autonomous region, and most of the time the government has absolutely no say in what's happening in the region. And whenever women try to appeal, try to take, for example, the judgments of the courts to the European level, to the European Court of Human Rights, whenever they pass a judgment for a woman facing some kind of injustice, the Russian government just says, this is a tradition, this is how the things are, and we have absolutely no say what's going on in the region. And I guess the first step when it comes to the solution of the problem would be acknowledge that women have human rights, grant them access to education, to self-determination, and agree that they need to be more vocal about their problems. There are crisis centers created by other solidar women in the region. However, even there, not always women are safe. They can be found there killed by their partner. And the culture is very much integrated also in the legal practice. So nowadays, lawyers, they try to defend their clients by saying, hey, actually, this man made a favor to this woman by killing her, because otherwise she would have just been a very big problem and humiliation for the rest of the family. So yeah, the situation is very tragic, and also the European support on the part of the European women would be also a great step when we talk about the solution to the problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Karina. Nesrin, you want to continue?
Yeah, I will continue with my focus, and my focus is the Kurdish region in the Middle East. And what we can see here, and what's also not always seen in the media, is that there is a huge movement of Kurdish women fighting for their rights and for their freedom. Started like in the last century, but still was very present in the fighting, in the war against ISIS, where women, they built an own army, and it's not only about like fighting equally as men, but also developing ideas about how women can be helped, and how women can be empowered in the region. So main goal of this army and this institution, a women's institution built in the region of Kurdistan, in the end is that women have equal rights, and that a democracy is only possible if women are actively an active method in the process, and also that they have a very important role in building a democracy there. So in the end, our organization ReOrient also focuses on topics regional based. In my case, it's, for example, the Kurdish region. In the case of Linder, which we'll talk afterwards, it's the region of Algeria and
North Africa.
North Africa, and Algeria and North Africa. So also our organization ReOrient want to give people here in Europe and in the world a bit more of how women are acting, how the women's movements are going forward in these countries. And therefore we also built a podcast, which is hopefully launched this year, where we also discuss these very important issues, and hopefully you will also join it.
Thank you, Nasrin. Okay, so Linda, you're the last one. Tell us about North Africa.
So hi everyone, my name is Linda Marie and I come from Algeria. I'm living in Germany, and I can see the situation here in Europe and in North Africa, and therefore I just wanted to focus on North Africa, because we also have really few informations about how the situation in North Africa is, and the equality for women in North Africa is in progress since 2017, and we can take the example of Tunisia, which in Tunisia, women's rights, they made advances in many topics such as inheritance, marriage, and so on. But however, the whole process is still facing many issues, and some of them are cultural or religious. And this is the big problem, I think, which is facing women's rights in North Africa. And the aim of our initiative is to the sensibilization through workshops with other organizations that are in Algeria, for example, my country, or in Morocco or in Tunisia, in order to make the process faster. And this is one of, or this is the aim of our organization, and we hope that it will be faster than it is right now. And thank you.
Thank you very much for all your introductions. It was very interesting. I will hand over the floor to my colleague Anna.
Yes, thank you very much from me as well. So before we head into the discussion, I wanted to ask the other participants who were not able to say something yet, if you want to ask any questions, or ask any questions, and if you want to respond to the questions, what do you see are the main issues here, or do you have any approaches or anything you want to address that wasn't said yet? Maybe, I don't know, Ivana or Alexander, Rosa, I don't know if anyone wants to say something. if not, we can just, yeah, I don't know if any of you who already said something, do you have any questions or comments or something you want to address?
I would just want to be very short that
yeah,
all these initiatives are so amazing. I'm just trying to take everything in. It's such a diverse group of people that I wouldn't even know where to begin to talk about all these topics. I think they're truly amazing, and each and every one of you doing this work, I mean, fascinating in your own field, fascinating and amazing. I'm really, really happy and really, really surprised to hear all of this, but I'm so happy that, you know, us women have good people fighting for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, maybe I can just throw in a question. The question of how can we educate young people better to make them sensitive to the topics and issues when it, which you all raised. Maybe some of you already addressed those issues, but maybe you could just go ahead. Yes, Dyria, please.
By the way, it's Daria. I wanted to, it's okay. I wanted to say that it's absolutely crucial to work with the mothers, to work with the women in the family. I can see that we have done a lot of work with the refugee communities here. And for integration, we always see that it's absolutely crucial to work with the mothers and to let them become part of the society. It's not working otherwise. So whether you work against radicalization, it's always the mother is like the key puzzle or the key to bring about change within the family, because she's holding a very important position within the family and then has influence, obviously, on the children and eventually on her husband as well. So I think that is always the person or the key to start with. And I think it is not being paid enough attention to how important it is to work with women in the family or with women communities.
Yes, thank you. Basak, please go ahead.
I think the approach in science is very similar to what Daria is saying. So we've also seen in sciences when there are role models as women, like maybe a group leader, they will become a center of attraction for also more women postdocs working with them and the new culture emerging, but also men, the new generation. I can only talk for sciences, so but when men are really eager to share the work in the house and come out as role models. So we had a blog in our project, for example, for marine scientists, to show that men and women can really also do more sharing. And I think all of these role models that are emerging as mother, as a group leader, as a father, that's really helpful for people, younger people to see possibilities for their futures.
Yes, thank you. Christian, please continue. You're still muted. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm both muted on my microphone and in the app. Sorry. Well, some of the problems I work with in Denmark kind of really pale in comparison to what you guys work with. So first of all, thank you so much for your work and your effort. But one perspective that I have seen being missed both when working at like the UN or European Commission, when we get to high scale levels, often we forget to actually just talk with the young people. I give a lot of talks and presentations in high schools, and one issue we've had, at least in Denmark, is, well, it kind of feels wrong to call it a problem compared to women having basic human rights or not being killed. But it's the fact that a lot of women receive dick pics, like unsolicited pictures of penises from the sender. And often like this is a punchline, or this is a joke, or this is something that's funny because, well, guys and their penises, am I right? But when I talk about digital education and therefore also sexual education at high schools, we often do a very basic exercise and just ask, like, if I have 300 students, ask them, how many of you guys received a dick pic? And we'll have like 2/3 of the women going like, yeah, sure. And about 5 to 10% of the guys going, yeah, I didn't know it was really funny. It was this student, he was super drunk. All right, but fine enough. Like, then we have the discussion and then talking about very basically, all right, women, those of you who received a dick pic, how many of you asked for it? How many of you inquired, can I please see a penis? And there we usually reach about none, like 0%. And then we can have the discussion, well, how many of you received an unsolicited dick pic and then thought, well, that was a very nice penis, I would like that penis? Still fucking none. Then we can talk to the guys and say, well, obviously it's not working. Why do you do it? Well, it's fun. How is it fun? And like, then just engaging in that conversation about sexuality and everyday perspective is very fruitful, because then we can like make a line of arguments as to why not to send pictures of your penis to people who didn't specifically ask to see it. One, we only last year had it made illegal in Denmark. Like, only now is it as illegal to show your penis via Snapchat as it is on the bus. That's a first. Like, that's an argument. You can't do it. It's illegal. Secondly, it doesn't work. Like, as a pickup line, your erect or flaccid penis, it's not your best move. So don't do it. Third of all, why the fuck would you do it? Like, this is a weird thing to do. You wouldn't do that in a disco. And it's not about the arguments, but it's just about being the relevant role model who wants to discuss feminism or basic human fucking social standards with young people. It's really fruitful. And often they will come up and say like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Should I also not do this? Usually, no, you shouldn't. But just opening up to having the talk at there's a feminist society in Denmark who talks about, well, right now academics do like feminism level 5. If we do feminism level 5 or equalitarian work level 5 with teenagers who never had a thought about political activism in their life, it's going to go whoosh over their head. So we need to like baseline equality. You can't show your genitals to people who don't want to see them. All right, then let's build from that. And just engaging young people, like basically public speaking with young people, not at young people, not doing it normatively, telling them you can't do this or you're supposed to do that, just telling them why it's wrong and then asking their perspective. Why do you want to show your penis to people? Well, it's a nice penis. I'm sure it is. Here's 5 reasons why you shouldn't. And like, just engage in the conversation, have the conversation with young people.
Yes, thank you. Nicolina, you want to continue?
I would just like to then sum it up, like connect everything that you said. So as I see their approaches, either I see digital activism because social media is blowing up every single day, and the best response and the broader audience that we can get is through social media. So that's probably the first thing. And then the second is actual real connection with young people, as you already mentioned, or with mothers or with young people especially. But I see in Croatia, it's really, really hard to get to young people. Either they're not interested. So if I were to say, okay, let's have a table talk or something, they wouldn't come. So the other solution is to go directly in institutions like schools, universities, etc., and then talk to them. But it's hard when you're doing it on maybe some more controversial questions, even like feminism in Croatia, which is stupid, but it's the truth. So either digital activism, either directly speaking to young people, but I think the second way is more effective, but I think harder in some countries to actually get to them.
Yes, thank you so much. Sophie, do you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight the role of formal plus non-formal peer education. This is basically what has been said. Just to sum it up once more, comprehensive sexuality education starts from a very, very early age, from homes. When a person is, I don't know, 1 year old and they're just learning what it is to have personal boundaries, what it needs to what means to consent to hugging, like very simple stuff. It doesn't have to be very complicated anatomical terms. It's very simple. And a lot of people still to this day don't understand what it means. In Georgia, for example, where I originally come from, people skip those chapters because they are considered vulgar or not fit for school education, which is not unacceptable, of course. But what it means to have comprehensive sexuality education integrated in school curriculums means that everyone will get a baseline of education. Everyone will know what it means to have a certain gender or to not have a certain gender, or to be of a certain sexuality, to have preferences, to be very positive about who you are as a person, to be assertive. And then that also translates into other aspects of our lives. So it's very interconnected, and we need to talk about it from an early age, both at homes and in formal settings.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else wants to comment or add to that? Yes, Karina, please.
Thank you very much. I couldn't find my virtual hand to raise. Yeah, I wanted to support the idea of role modeling. I guess one of the problems is not so much that there are just a bunch of problems between men and women that were different, but when it comes to gender, that women have way more roles in the society. They can be equally mothers, they can be workers, they can be whoever they want. Whereas when it comes to men, and when they lose their job, they find it, for example, very hard to acquire a new social status, a new position. So we've taken a woman out of the kitchen, we've empowered her so women can do everything in the world, whereas men, when they lose their job, they cannot find them doing the household chores, for example. So I guess the role models with a lot of authority on social media or just in public life, who can multitask both their career with their household responsibilities, could be a very educational step, and could be very, very helpful in tackling this gender problematic that men find it a bit more difficult to adjust themselves to the new realities. Because when Christian in the beginning was talking about the fact that men feel just unacknowledged by the society, and that they feel lost, and that they blame women, maybe they do blame them because women can more easily adjust to new realities rather than men.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Daria, please go ahead.
I also wanted to say that in the Oriental societies, menstruation, for example, is quite a taboo topic. And I think part of the reason is because they don't really talk about it in school, or it's not being talked about as a conversation to have. And I think here the cultural change must also happen. And for me, I mean, in Germany, you get sexual orientation and you have Aufklärungsunterricht. And I think this should happen across all countries, and maybe something with the educational system to influence that, and how to talk about these very normal and totally natural things is very important. And I think the factor, especially in religious society, that kind of makes it even more difficult to tackle those problems.
Yes, thank you. I agree with that, definitely. Nyke, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I might want to add that in Germany, actually, education is not decided on the national level, but every region can have its own education policies. So sex education varies a lot among regions in Germany. And actually in the most, I mean, Berlin is a very progressive city and region in Germany, but in most areas of Germany, we only have very basic sex education. So It is explained how babies are made, but that's basically it. After that, it stops. There's no education on what is gender, what is sexual orientation, what are all the identities, what is diversity, why is it important? We don't have that in most schools, so it's still a very current topic actually in our political discussion. But I think we should have definitely this as an agenda to educate young people in our schools, but we also need diversity education for our authorities, for like state institutions, to have, for example, police educated. Yeah, sexual abuse is a big problem for women, for queer people, and even though most of the stuff that happens is illegal and people go to the police, women go to the police, then they are confronted with people who are not very sensitive towards the issue of sexual abuse. And this is definitely something that really needs to change, that still needs to change. And that is true for a lot of areas where, yeah, universities and so on. I think that all the institutions that are funded by the state, we should really provide diversity education.
Yes, thank you very much. Christian.
Yes, actually, just to follow up with a question, because now we're kind of talking about sexual education and gender education through that. In Denmark, sexual education is in the 7th grade, usually around age 12 to 13. And it's usually segregated. Like the boys will go into one room and talk about condoms and sexually transmitted diseases. Girls will stay in another room and talk about menstruation and babies. We're reforming that and making it an optional electoral course, including consent and I think actually the vocab for it is just called queerness in Denmark. I would love, like, I am on the advisory board of that project in Denmark. I would love some input as to how to do good, comprehensive sexual education from your perspectives. Should we still segregate? What should we include? Should we be talking about consent? What should or should not we be talking about?
Does anyone want to? Yeah, Sophie, please go ahead.
Yeah, there are actual guidelines by, I think it's UNESCO and WHO. If you Google CSC guidelines, you should find the document. It's a age and needs-based document. It's very comprehensive, so that would be useful. I've noticed that the topics that you mentioned are also gender-specific. So like condoms and something else, and then menstruation, and that is also not, yeah. Maybe better change that.
Yes, thank you. I noticed in the chat that Alexander, you wanted to say something, or was this your contribution that you sent in the chat? Okay, so Anna wrote something about the, Nyke already mentioned that we need to quotas for the different genders in the political sphere. Does everyone here agree? So what do you say to that if you, yeah, Manon, please.
Sorry, I don't know if you can see me on that. Yeah, for sure, we would for sure agree with quotas. Also, you know, we know there's resistance from many countries and many people to the idea of quota, and even from some women, for example, saying, you know, we don't want to be the quota, but we really present it as kind of this first step, kind of, that is not meant to be forever. It's really just to kind of open the door. And so then, you know, kind of introducing, for example, women again in the political sphere. And then first you have the political parties saying that actually it works, but also kind of other young people seeing themselves represented. And so hoping for this kind of virtual circle. But we always say, of course, quotas are not like the ultimate solution. As I was saying, it's the first step. But I think it goes hand in hand with what I was saying about having kind of, it's one of those specific measures that we can take. But I think there's a lot of work to be done also at the level of the political bodies, really. There's many things there. Also thinking that, you know, quotas is good, but like, I mean, in French, for example, and so in France, we do have quotas 50-50, but then we also have, when you look at the list, like the political list, it's 50-50, but it's also alternate. So that you don't have like the 50% of the men all at the top and the 50% of the women all at the bottom, making sure that, you know, they are also on top of the list, making sure they are in parts that actually can be won, because that's also something we've seen happen, where we put those people in the parts that we know anyway we're not going to win, so that we don't really care in the end. And it's making sure that within the political parties, you have things happening there. So you have trainings, you know, on these issues. You have, I know, policies on like sexual harassment, for example, which can really be prevalent there. You make sure that the political parties' programs are sensitive, you know, that there's this gender perspective in the political programs. So yeah, it really goes hand in hand with these sort of solutions, and also just reforming the whole patriarchal society, of course, which is easier said than done. But yeah, for sure, we would totally agree with the quotas.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yeah, Basak, please.
But just very shortly, in sciences, we also have quotas in our institutions, because we think we need them. But what I wanted to bring forward is that these quotas are putting sometimes women in a hard situation with a lot of extra load, because there are fewer women in these positions where they can become part of decision-making boards, for example. So it's very important to give compensation to those women, which is not really there. So they don't get to do their science, or they don't have enough time to do the other work that also brings them forward in their career then. And it's very important to give them extra personnel or extra payment or whatever is needed, but that's always lacking. So it puts these women also in a very difficult situation sometimes. That's the negative side.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else like to add to that?
I could add just a bit.
Yeah,
we also
go
have
ahead.
quotas in Croatia, as you mentioned. In France, they're 40-60. And I think quotas are good as a transitional thing, definitely. I like quotas. But what we see in Croatia is that they take women, you know, just for the quota, just for the poster. And usually women in parties are the ones, as Basak mentioned something like this, they do other things than actually being politicians. So they clean the rooms or organize some events or gather people and things like those. Not necessarily political things, but more of cleaning up things. And that's you know, something that it's not good that comes from quotas in the end. But as a transitional thing, I think that they're the best that we have. We have nothing better than this. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. We only have about 12 minutes left, and at the end of our sessions, we'd like to gather some key takeaways from the session. So maybe everyone can just think of a short closing statement for the discussion, and just sum up your point of view on this, or anything you've learned in this session, or do you want, yeah, something like that. So just go ahead, maybe, I don't know, Astrid, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I can do that. Yeah, from my perspective, this is, as I highlighted, when it comes to occupant safety, we need to to address men and women equally. To start with, acknowledge that both parts of the population exist at all. So we are really back to basics here. But I think also what I have been thinking about when we have talked about this around the table is what Christian is highlighting, and the real power if we do this together. So if we could be as many men and as women, or boys as girls, here around the table, and get that force to use also. I think education is important, but get the men on board.
Yes, definitely. Christian, please go ahead.
Thank you. To me, in these talks, there's always a privilege perspective. When I hear about some of the other tasks that we're faced with when doing gender equality, both in like other regions and geographical regions and nations, it kind of puts into perspective what we battle with here in Denmark, and it's an eye-opener. So thank you a lot for like broadening my scope on that once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know, maybe Nyke, you want to say something, or tell us your closing statement?
I can say something. I'm actually quite hopeful because most of the time when you talk to young people, they're all very open when it comes to diversity and feminism, and summing up, to some extent or another, we are all part of some form of diversity. Most of us, like the actual people who just fit in the historical pattern of white, cis, men, whatever, they're the minority in our society. And actually, all of us, the women, the queer people, people who have some form, people who have migration history, I don't know what the proper English term for that is, sorry for that, people of color and so on, we're all in some form, we belong to a certain community in form of diversity. And I think that makes us, that really makes me hopeful that if we join together, then we can, really reform society. And I think we will need some form of quotas to reach that goal, and we will need more education, and we will need to build a lot of bridges in society, but I think we can do it.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe Daria or Karina, Linder, Nesrin, do you want to go ahead?
I can maybe just, or Linder, do you want to, Karina? If not, I would just say a few words that women's rights are really the most important requirement to ensure human and civil rights. And we always have to kind of put that in front of us. And just because we live in a democracy, we are still not equal and we still have a long way to go. I do believe what Nyke just said as well, we get there, but it's quite slowly. And we must push to get to where we should be. And women are a vital puzzle to solve the issue of radicalization, especially from the region we're dealing with. Women, I mean, the power of women is not being harnessed enough. And I think that's why I think it's even more important that we support women from here and also bring or build platforms for them to become role models and to become leading figures for the younger generation. And for refugee communities or for minority communities, I would wish for more education also in the financial independence, which is a very important aspect, which we have maybe not yet mentioned. Family planning also is very important, and there's not enough focus on that. And mental health and how to become empowered in your family or in the community you live in. So yeah, and we need to build better and bigger networks to connect and do exactly what we're doing now. Maybe we are kind of working on different fields, but we do have a common denominator, and that is what connects us. So Karina, do you want to say something as well?
I guess the multicultural nature of our initiative also dictates us to not forget about the intersectionality when it comes to solving some gender problems in Europe, because even if we take our initiative, we all have some kind of different backgrounds, whether it's an immigrant one or a cultural one, and this all plays a crucial role in our own becoming.
Yes, thank you so much. Great points you said there, both of you. Maybe Sophie, you want to continue?
Yes, I think it's important to make sure that young people are involved in all and every aspects of decision-making, policy change, creating curriculums for education, especially when it comes to comprehensive sexuality education. And we also need to establish some monitoring and evaluation mechanisms so that we can keep ourselves accountable, but also keep the policymakers and decision makers accountable for it. And those needs also need to be very gender sensitive. And education cannot be stressed enough, I think. Education at all levels, in every institution, starting from family, starting from a very, very young age.
Yes, thank you. Nicolina, you want to?
Definitely, thank you. I'm so happy to have had this opportunity to be with you today, to hear about your initiatives and actually to learn from all of you. I've learned so many new things today. This is really, really interesting. I see because we all work in all different sides and all different areas, I see this as such a big advantage to feminism, because while working in all these different areas and being experts even in all these different areas, we are covering all sides in our feminist perspective, because we face oppression in all these different perspectives. So I'm so happy that we have such strong forces in all these different areas, and I hope we'll meet again. And I also hope that in all of your movements, you will have a lot of luck in bringing equality to women and men. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, does anyone else wants to say something? Or yeah, Manon, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone. As Nicolina said, I just really learned a lot also, and it's not eye-opening, but just really, really great to hear from all of you and from very different sectors. And I want to share a little bit of the hope also of some of them, of some of you. You know, I know it's hard right now to see it sometimes, but I think in the end, we know what we have to do and we know what are the solutions. And so now it's really about implementing them, which is, you know, the hardest part, but still, I think we can have hope that we'll manage at some point, and, you know, easier sooner than later. And yeah, I just wanted also to emphasize Sophie's point at some point in the discussion, and it's mostly for like reflection also for everyone, but on the issue of online violence. I think especially now in you know, the situation we are and the fact that we use technology even more, that's something that is extremely prevalent and that is really preventing, for example, women from the public sphere, and it's something very strong in the political sphere, for example. So I think there's really a space where we need to act and to really see online violence as part of the continuum of violence, and not just something that is just online, so doesn't have any repercussions then in the real world, as we call it. So yeah, sorry, I wanted to say that earlier and I forgot, so I just wanted to bring that back. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Yes, if there are not any more questions, I think we've come to the end of our session. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your ideas and thoughts on this topic. And yeah, sadly, this will be our last Europe Jam this year, but we will be back next year in January with 2 more pretty special jams. So stay tuned and we'll keep you posted. And yeah, thank you. Thanks again for being here, and have a nice evening. Happy holidays, and yeah, see you next year.
I just want to add something. So if you want to be connected, we can share your contact with all of you, if you agree with that. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so we will keep you posted, as Anna said. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.